Earlier this month, February 2026, a flicker of a video on TikTok cracked open one of the most unnerving missing person cases in recent memory. Investigators in the St. Louis area said a clip had surfaced that might show one of six people who had vanished back in August of 2023. Four adults and two small children, all of which had been living as devoted followers of an online spiritual movement called the Uniersity of Cosmic Intelligence. For nearly 3 years, there had been nothing. No confirmed phone activity, no banking trail, no social media posts that could be authenticated. Just silence. And now, a possible image? Police moved quickly to seek account and location data tied to the upload. If genuine, it could be the first verifiable proof of life thread in a case that has been defined by absence. That thin digital filament is where this story currently stands. And to understand how it got here, how a group of adults could walk away from family, jobs, and any traceable life with children in tow, you just have to wind the clock back before the disappearance, before the prison sentence, and before the word cult began appearing in headlines. You have to look at the man behind the movement, the beliefs that formed around him, and the documented criminal history that seems to complicate every claim of cosmic enlightenment. And today, we are going to unpack it all. So sit back, relax, and take a deep breath. It's time to let the fresh air in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back, or welcome if you're new. My name is Erin, and I am fascinated by all things cults, true crime, and unique spiritual practices. I also like to keep you on the lookout for spiritual scams that I come across. So if commentary style content like this interests you, please consider subscribing to the channel. I would love to have you here. Now, without further ado, we're going to just go ahead and jump right in. For nearly 3 years, the case sat in a category that investigators privately acknowledge as one of the most difficult to resolve: disappearance without immediate evidence of violence and without digital residue. Four adults and two children vanished from the St. Louis area in August 2023, leaving behind personal belongings, identification documents, and a rental home that showed no overt signs of forced entry or even struggle. And in a country that is saturated with surveillance systems, transaction logs, and cellular pings, their disappearance was remarkably clean. The group consisted of Mikayla Wickerson, her young daughter Malaya, Gerrielle German, her son Ashton, Mikayla Thompson, and Naaman Williams. They'd all been living together in a rental property in Berkeley, Missouri, near Lambert St. Louis International Airport. And according to reporting and statements from relatives, the adults had grown increasingly immersed in an online spiritual movement called the Uniersity of Cosmic Intelligence. And they were involved in this group months leading up to their disappearance. Family members would later describe a pattern of withdrawal. They had reduced their communication, and they had this fixation on the ideology of the cult. Neighbors even described unusual behavior in the yard, including prolonged outdoor activity that stood out as very atypical. Now, on August 13th, 2023, the six were last seen in a hotel in Florissant, Missouri, and after that date, confirmed financial activity tied to them stopped. Just all of it. There were no phone records. They didn't show any traceable use of phones or social media. Identification documents were also reportedly left behind in the rental home, along with all their personal items. So the absence of forced entry or visible violence complicated any immediate classification. I mean, these were families that effectively disappeared altogether. So law enforcement publicly acknowledged that those adults might have left voluntarily. But that possibility doesn't just close a case, especially when children are involved. Voluntary adult disappearance doesn't resolve any questions about their children's safety. Now, although the leader of this cosmic university movement, Rashad Jamal, will claim that no one ever actually goes missing, it's always a hoax, which is very convenient for him when members of his cult end up going missing. But missing persons cases often hinge on financial mistakes or technological oversight, and even individuals attempting to disappear frequently leave behind little errors. A debit card swipe, a phone briefly powered on, an ATM withdrawal, a license plate scan. But in this case, investigators have described a near total absence of confirmed digital footprint after mid-August 2023. And that level of erasure is rare, but unfortunately, it's not impossible. Now, the Missouri disappearance cannot be examined without examining the context in which it occurred. Now, by the summer of 2023, Rashad Jamal, the founder of the Uniersity of Cosmic Intelligence, was awaiting trial in Georgia on charges of child molestation and first-degree cruelty to children. Yeah, sounds like a guy I definitely want to follow into enlightenment. The charges stemmed from allegations involving a minor connected to his household. Now, he was arrested in 2022 and was actually denied bond. And during bond proceedings, prosecutors referenced prior Wisconsin convictions involving domestic violence related offenses, including a 2017 guilty plea to domestic battery and additional convictions for strangulation and suffocation, as well as disorderly conduct tied to domestic abuse. Yeah. So maybe we just need to start doing background checks on some of these spiritual leaders or cult leaders before we just jump on in. Now, Jamal's Georgia trial concluded in August 2023, and a jury convicted him of one count of child molestation and one count of first degree cruelty to children while acquitting him on a second charge. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison, followed by 22 years of probation. Now, he has publicly denied the allegations and has rejected the characterizations of his organization being a cult. And this timing is all notable, but understood it's not proof of causation. The Missouri group disappeared in the same month that Jamal's conviction was finalized, and whether these two events are connected remains unproven. Law enforcement hasn't charged Jamal in connection with the disappearance. And now let's talk a little bit about the movement itself. The Uniersity of Cosmic Intelligence grew online. It literally grew online. And if you are still a person who denies the impact and power that an online cult can have on people, well, hopefully this video proves you otherwise, because we have a wealth of connection on the internet, and it is the main way that cults are spreading in modern day. Because this cult exists as a digital network of live stream lectures, archived content, and a following that refers to itself as a spiritual family. Central to Jamal's teachings is the reframing of Black and Latino identity as spiritually elevated. Followers are described as carbonated beings. And now, if this sparks a reminder in your brain, you might be thinking about carbonation, which is the cult that Nature Boy was running, where people ended up dying because he convinced them to not take their medication. And of course, he called his cult Carbonation. But what's really, really fascinating is Nature Boy would end up being convicted in, I believe it was March 2024. So just 9 months after the conviction of Rashad Jamal, and they were both kind of touting very, very similar beliefs, that the darker the skin, the more enlightened you are, the more powerful you are. And this is all language that ties biological references to cosmic mythology. And institutional distrust was woven throughout both doctrines, in Carbon Nation and in this particular cult. This cult believed that government, media, courts, and education systems were all characterized as corrupt apparati designed to suppress your spiritual truth. And obviously, these frameworks create an interpretive insulation. When followers start to believe that anything mainstream has been manipulated, external correction becomes difficult, meaning it becomes a lot more difficult for people not involved in the cult to try to connect with people and say, hey, hi, red flag, you are in a cult. Critics are dismissed as programmed or spiritually compromised. This is the implantation of the seed that is the us versus them mentality. And, of course, like many cult leaders before Rashad, legal consequences became reframed as persecution. Now, once again, in the Missouri case, those family members had reported this withdrawal from the family by the adults who had disappeared with their kids. And this pattern aligns with documented psychological shifts that we see in very many other high control environments. And unfortunately, this does not in and of itself prove coercion or criminal intent because isolation can occur so gradually and it appears to be voluntary, especially when belief is reframing all outside concern from loved ones as actually a threat. So, for nearly 3 years, the investigation into the disappearance of these 6 people produced no confirmed sightings. But suddenly, recently, authorities announced that a TikTok video had surfaced that might show one of the missing women. Investigators initiated legal process to obtain account registration data and location information from the platform. And they cautioned that the identity of the person in the video had not been verified, but if authenticated, it could provide geographic clues, and it could speak to why these people disappeared. Was there or is there some secret commune somewhere in the Mississippian wilderness that we just don't know about? Is this cult still surviving today? Now, the silence surrounding the disappearance has only amplified speculation online. Some sympathetic voices frame the group's absence as an intentional withdrawal from a corrupt system, but others speculate about harm occurring after departure. Now, law enforcement has not publicly confirmed either scenario, and the Missouri case sits at the intersection of digital ideology and physical disappearance. It doesn't yet prove that belief caused harm, but it does demonstrate that belief coincided with rupture, with a total break from any documented life. So, to understand how a digital movement can reach that point requires us to step even further backward in time and into the formation of the Uniersity of Cosmic Intelligence itself. The Uniersity of Cosmic Intelligence presents itself as an educational platform, but it operates as most spiritual communities and educational platforms do without any accreditation, no physical campus, or recognition from academic resources. Its infrastructure exists entirely online. The term university is used to try to give this organization more validation. It's hoping that people don't look any further, even though it's functioning more as a rhetorical positioning rather than a real institution. It signals that there's authority and a structure, and it lends credibility to what is fundamentally a personality-driven belief system. Jamal's teachings blend Afrocentric reinterpretations of history, New Age metaphysics, cosmic mythology, and pronounced distrust of mainstream institutions, all collected into a smorgasbord of a man's ramblings on lives. Now, central to the movement's appeal is its reframing of racial identity. Black and Latino individuals are described as spiritually elevated beings, referred to in Jamal's terminology as those carbonated beings whose true divine nature has been suppressed by a corrupt system. And in this cosmology, oppression becomes evidence not just of vulnerability, but of hidden power. Followers are taught that they are targeted precisely because of their spiritual significance. And this reframing operates alongside an expansion rejection of institutional authority. And if I were to put myself in the position of someone who had been oppressed for their race for the entirety of not just my life, but my ancestors' lives, I could absolutely see how this would resonate. It's kind of a reclaiming of your power. It is shutting down the systems that have torn families apart, forced labor upon people for centuries, all to put money in a white man's pocket. So when you have that culture seeped into your bloodline, of course, ideology like this might be attractive to you. Because you probably already don't trust government agencies or courts or media organizations, potentially educational systems, and other elements of modern science. These are all being portrayed in this group of components of a deliberately manipulative structure designed to keep people spiritually asleep. And whether or not you find a little bit of truth in that statement, even as it doesn't relate to a spiritual life, but an economic one or a social one, I think we're able to piece together reasons why this particular group might have been interesting to people. So, obviously, if you're feeling empowered, you're going to look at any outside criticism as just confirmation to what the leader is teaching you. Because if journalists investigate, it's because, oh, they're secretly complicit to the courts. And if those courts convict, it's because the whole system is corrupt. And if family members express concern, well, it's because they're just indoctrinated by the system. And these belief structures obviously are not unique at this point, but the University of Cosmic Intelligence developed within the fertile ecosystem of algorithm driven platforms where emotionally charged content can spread rapidly and without any institutional filtering. And recruitment here rarely resembles any overt coercion, it begins with resonance. A viewer encounters a video that articulates frustration about racial injustice or economic instability or institutional distrust, and the message feels clarifying, empowering. And community reinforcement follows through with live stream chats and comment sections that reward agreement and repetition. Shared vocabulary begins to deepen that group identity. And over time, the follower's interpretive authority may shift away from conventional institutions and towards the movement's content library. You know, it's when you find a creator you like and you just binge their channel over and over and over and over again. These behavioral changes can accompany that shift. Now, some followers reportedly withdrew from family members who would question the teachings. Employment and conventional routines were reframed as participation in a corrupt system. So they're totally separating from mainstream society and they're thinking that they are becoming more spiritually advanced. So it's within this psychological progression that the Missouri disappearance occurred. Now, this movement's broader orbit has intersected with other serious criminal cases that involve individuals described in reporting as followers. In 2022, Adam Simji was killed in Alabama during a violent encounter that involved two women who were later sentenced in federal court. Reporting linked the defendants to off grid living and to content associated with the University of Cosmic Intelligence. And in another case that same year, an Alabama man killed his mother and attacked other relatives before being found not guilty by reason of insanity. And media coverage described his immersion in this fringe online ideology being the reason for his behavior. Now, it's kind of scary how this kind of spiritual psychosis can occur when people are watching the same type of content over and over and over and over again. And then There's just no real public evidence that Jamal himself ordered these acts, so he hasn't been charged in connection with them. But it does seem odd, doesn't it, that the recurrence of these extreme acts of violence are all tied to individuals who are connected to the movement's ecosystem. It just seems like this group, this man, had a lot of influence. But that influence is difficult to trace. So now investigators are pursuing digital breadcrumbs in hopes of determining whether the missing six are alive and living deliberately outside conventional systems, or whether something more tragic occurred after they left Missouri. And the outcome still remains uncertain. What is certain is that the intersection of charismatic authority, criminal history, and digitally mediated belief has already left a trail of fractured families, prosecuted crimes, and unanswered questions. So now let's talk a little bit about the man himself, Rashad Jamal. Now, long before the Missouri disappearance placed renewed scrutiny on the University of Cosmic Intelligence, Rashad had already accumulated a criminal record that complicates any simple narrative of spiritual leadership. And we've talked a little bit about it previously in this video, but I just want to dive in a little bit deeper to some things that happened before his most recent conviction. The public record shows that in 2017, he pleaded guilty in Wisconsin to domestic battery. Reporting from subsequent legal proceedings also references additional Wisconsin convictions in 2018 involving strangulation and suffocation, as well as disorderly conduct in domestic abuse contexts. These convictions were not obscure footnotes. They were later cited during bond arguments in Georgia when prosecutors argued when Jamal posed a risk on prior behavior. Now, those earlier convictions predate the rise of the University of Cosmic Intelligence as a visible online movement. But in the late 2010s and early 2020s, Jamal had begun cultivating a digital persona centered all around spiritual awakening, cosmic reinterpretation of identity, and, of course, institutional distrust. Like many online figures operating in adjacent spaces of spirituality and conspiracy, he blended cultural grievance, metaphysical language, and direct-to-camera charisma. This live stream format that seemed to be his favorite allowed for extended monologues that mimicked lecture environments while trying to preserve intimacy. Viewers were not passive, they were addressed directly as participants in an unfolding revolution. And this dynamic matters because charismatic authority is rarely built solely on ideas. It's built on presentation. Jamal's delivery style reportedly emphasized certainty. He didn't frame his teachings as hypotheses, but as decoded truths. And often in high control environments, the tone of certainty can substitute any empirical validation. Followers who are already predisposed to distrust institutions might find clarity in that unwavering posture. But this man, after watching some of his live streams, although he speaks with conviction, it's almost like he sets up his followers to accept his future bad behavior. There's a live stream where he literally talks about how missing people are never actually missing. That is just a scam. And it is so scary to watch this rhetoric because you can't help but wonder, was he trying to indoctrinate his followers to look domestic abuse, child abuse, missing people, potentially murders? Was he hoping that he was going to be able to get them to kind of turn a blind eye to that because he wanted that power? Because, as is so fascinating, anytime a spiritual leader or a cult leader goes to jail, that conviction does not automatically dissolve those belief systems built around those leaders. And actually, it's kind of like another piece of confirmation bias. There is psychological research that demonstrates that legal consequences just strengthen those in group cohesion when followers are already accepting that institutions are corrupt, because the narrative shifts from our leader did wrong to, well, our leader's being targeted, they're being prosecuted. And it's just like, can we listen to the victims? Can we listen to the survivors? Can we pay attention to the evidence? And look, cults are really all about ideology, ideas being shared. And now we're in the era of influencers sharing their ideas and misinformation and opinions without any backed evidence. And that is exactly why online groups present a danger, because it isn't just simply, oh, we're just spreading ideas. These ideas become permission. So, how do people even get involved in these groups to begin with? Thanks to our trusty algorithm, if you are already looking at content that is predominantly spiritual, if you are feeling like you're in a particularly vulnerable position where maybe you're looking to be empowered, you're looking to help yourself in some way, you might be interested in self development and growth, then your algorithm is already set to pump you full of the ideas that you are already seeking. It is a confirmation bias machine, because people, once they've decided they have a certain belief, they're not going to look for any evidence that opposes that or contradicts that. They're just going to keep looking for evidence that their new opinion, their new belief system is correct. And this isn't just in the context of this group, it is cults and ideologies and politics and all of that across the board. If you are not seeing a variety of different information on your timeline when you scroll on TikTok or Instagram, you gotta broaden your resources. You gotta look some different stuff up. You need to find some alternative information and just make sure that you are critically thinking instead of just blindly following and believing these influencers, because that is how people get hooked. Because if you're in a vulnerable place and you see one of Rashad's videos, you're hooked. He makes you feel special, suppressed, but chosen. And then comes the glue. He's going to start telling you that no, it's never you. The whole system is corrupt. And all evidence against me saying that, well, that's all fake. That's all a part of this design. We're all living in the matrix. And then comes the sacrifice. If you want to feel better, if you want to do better in life, you have to cut off all those low vibration people and detach completely from conventional life. And look, I get it. I slept on the floor for a year because I thought minimalism was the way to go, and sleeping on the floor made me better than everybody else. Yeah, I thank my lucky stars every single day that I have a husband that wants to sleep in a bed. It's great. But what's kind of scary about the University of Cosmic Intelligence in particular is that, similarly to Warren Jeffs, whose fundamentalist Mormon group still operates even though he's in jail, so does this group. This man built a network. It didn't require a compound or communal housing or retreats. Its entire infrastructure was digital. And that distinction isn't cosmetic. It fundamentally alters how influence spreads and how control is maintained. Now, the movement's core delivery system consisted of live stream lectures and archived recordings that were distributed through major social platforms. And these long form videos were often structured as didactic sessions with Jamal, and he was positioned as both the instructor and the great revealer. The university framing wasn't just the branding, it was shaped as the relational dynamic between the speaker and his audience. Viewers weren't just simply consuming content, they were students in a cosmological curriculum. Now, in psychological terms, this structure fosters vertical authority. The leader occupies the role of interpreter of hidden knowledge, and followers are positioned as initiates progressing toward awakening. The relationship becomes epistemological. The leader explains reality itself. And when a figure claims authority over how reality should be interpreted, dissent becomes not disagreement, but confusion or spiritual deficiency. Now, one of the most potent elements in the UCI framework is identity elevation. By describing Black and Latino followers as spiritually superior or cosmically significant carbonated beings, the movement started to reframe marginalization as sacred designation. And of course, this tactic is not unique to many high control movements. They often offer identity inversion as that entry point. But what makes it powerful here is that, like I said before, it is addressing those legitimate grievances, racial inequality, systemic injustice, and then it redirects them into a more metaphysical hierarchy. And this inversion can create a powerful psychological reward loop. Followers are told that they're not oppressed because they're powerless, they're oppressed because they're powerful. The reframing preserves dignity while externalizing blame. And it also strengthens in group cohesion. If only certain people possess cosmic status, then that membership to that group becomes totally sacred. So, when their leader goes to jail, do you think they're going to turn their back on him? No, because that just confirms their belief that the Black man who is powerful and empowered and special is being persecuted. So, in this case, Jamal's conviction didn't eliminate the movement's online presence. Archived lectures still remain accessible, and supporters would continue to distribute content. The narrative framing around his persecution just persisted in sympathetic spaces. So, this digital structure has allowed the ideology to survive independent of any physical presence. What's so scary about this being an online movement is there's a lot we still don't know. Anyone can wax poetic and share their opinions online, but it's very, very difficult to always pinpoint how large the group is and how widespread the ideology is, especially when the leader is effectively behind bars and is no longer creating content. Now, obviously, we want there to be some kind of connection between the missing six and Jamal. I mean, we know very well that he potentially could have been involved in their disappearance in some way, despite being behind bars. And that, of course, is speculation. But one thing that cult leaders often have is an inner circle that they have do their dirty work. So, who knows? And I don't think it's a coincidence that multiple people have done violent acts, some against their own family and some with things like swords, who are all somehow connected to this university. The fact that there are so many unanswered questions makes me very, very uneasy because in researching this and in writing this script, it was very difficult to really get a deep understanding, like I usually like to, about this group. So I think the key takeaways are that you can get involved in a dangerous online group. I've covered so many of these dangerous groups online. And since there are new eyes on the missing six, and hopefully we will actually find them and hear their story and try to understand what was going on there, maybe we will get some more clarity on this man and his group. Now, if you look at the university's website, you will see courses. You will also see clips of his live streams that he would end up selling. He also was a musician. So he was definitely, in my opinion, in it for the money and specifically control. Typically, we see these groups, leaders, focusing on the three tiers of like what is important to a cult leader, and that is sex, money, and control. I don't have any information on the sexual aspect or that power dynamic, especially this being an online group, but I very well know that this man liked having power and he liked having money, and he was devoted to getting those two things at any cost. And that's what's the most dangerous about groups like this and leaders like this, because to be honest, I don't think they really care about what they're saying. All they care about is posting something that is going to invoke either excitement, anger, rage, empowerment. They're going to share something so clickbaity that someone clicks on it and there's a feeling invoked that draws the viewer in. And of course, this isn't just central to cult leaders, it's central to all influencers. There's no way to get views on something if you don't spark a feeling in someone that makes them want to click on it. And unfortunately, we're in this era of the angrier people are, the more likely they will be to click on your content. I mean, some of you have called out how you think my thumbnails, I'm going to be a big B word in it. And then you watch the video and you're like, oh, you're actually compassionate and nice. And it's because every time I listen to a lecture on how to create the best thumbnail, it's you need to make people either really, really happy or really, really angry. It's like two massive feelings. You want that pendulum to swing. And that's exactly what this man did here. Now, I'm going to do my best to cover this case as closely as I can. I actually am working on a project. I am an actor, as a lot of you know, and I booked something that I've been working on, and I'm working on it into next week. So I won't be able to go live, but I hope that I will be able to post some kind of a reaction video next week or share with you guys this website because it is ridiculous. This guy is just, you can't take him seriously. He's honestly disgusting. And I guess what I want to leave you with today is you really need to Google the people you follow online. It doesn't matter who they are, how many followers they are. A follower count does not make them legitimate. It does not make them smarter. It does not make them more knowledgeable. So many people out there are claiming to be doctors, but they're not even a doctor in the medical field, but they're handing out medical advice. So many people are claiming to be experts in something just because they share a lot of personal anecdotes online. These are the things and the people that you need to be aware of. And hopefully in watching this video, you're able to pinpoint more of those. So again, I'll be following this story as we get more information. I really hope that we find the missing 6. And if you have any other details, please leave them in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for being here today. Stay safe out there. Always ask questions and always stay skeptical. I'll see you in my next video very soon. Bye, y'all.